During the American Civil War, the western border saw no standard infantry marching in straight lines. It was dominated by irregulars, men striking from the brush with sudden, overwhelming violence. One of these riders was Lee McMurtry. Looking back on his service, he described his experience bluntly. "I fought under the black flag for 2 years, and I tell you, it's a mighty dangerous business." Raising the black flag meant a war of absolute annihilation. It was a formal signal that no quarter would be asked and no mercy would be granted to prisoners. McMurtry survived the slaughter to make a calculated pivot, trading the total lawlessness of his youth for the badge of a Texas sheriff. This 1800s map shows the Missouri and Kansas border, the theater where the Civil War started years before the rest of the country. The divide was stark. Anti-slavery Kansans, known as Jayhawkers, frequently raided across the line. In response, pro-slavery Missourians formed bands of bushwhackers to defend their territory and exact revenge. This was an intimate neighbor-on-neighbor conflict. There were no standing armies here in the 1850s, just rival settlements fighting over property, politics, and survival. With local courts and military authority completely broken down, violence became the only law. This chaos produced a generation of ruthless, irregular fighters, men like Lee McMurtry. This printed chapter heading reads, "Shot down like dogs." It describes the tactics of McMurtry's commanders. He rode with guerrilla mastermind William C. Quantrill and the notoriously violent Captain William Bloody Bill Anderson. In August 1863, Quantrill's forces crossed into Kansas. Bypassing military forts, they struck directly at Lawrence, an undefended anti-slavery town. The raid killed over 150 civilian men and boys. Military targets were ignored. The focus was extermination. Historical records place Lee McMurtry squarely in the middle of this raid, actively participating as the town burned. The Lawrence massacre stripped away any illusion of military honor. McMurtry and his unit operated entirely outside the rules of warfare, executing civilians. A year later, in September 1864, the fighting returned to Missouri at the Battle of Fayette. During a chaotic raid, McMurtry took a severe hit. He fell close to the enemy line, pinned down by heavy fire and unable to retreat. According to local lore, 2 of his comrades saw him fall, broke from cover, and charged through the gunfire to pull him to safety. One of those purported rescuers was another young guerrilla from Clay County, Missouri, a teenager who would later become the notorious outlaw Jesse James. We have to treat that story with caution. Irregular guerrilla units did not file official after-action reports or maintain strict casualty lists. We rely almost entirely on oral traditions and frontier memory. When the war ended, Quantrill was dead and the bushwhackers scattered. McMurtry briefly associated with the post-war James Gang before the heat became intense, forcing him to flee south into Mexico. Because these men fought in the shadows, unrecorded by the formal military chain of command, sorting the hard historical facts of McMurtry's service from the campfire myths is nearly impossible. This map traces McMurtry's return to the United States after his time in exile. He crossed back over the Mexican border, spent time in New Mexico, and eventually settled in Wichita Falls, Texas. The Texas frontier of the late 19th century was rapidly consolidating. Open cattle towns were giving way to organized settlements, and citizens were demanding strict civil order. To bring that order, the county needed someone who wasn't intimidated by violence. They hired Lee McMurtry, the former bushwhacker, as their sheriff. Local newspapers praised his work. One report stated he made the best sheriff in the county because he was absolutely fearless and enforced the law to the letter. The lethal skills and fearlessness honed in the brush of Missouri were highly prized on the Texas frontier. To a community desperate for stability, McMurtry's past was less of a deterrent than his proven ability to command a dangerous situation. McMurtry lived to the age of 66. In 1908, he died from a sudden illness at his daughter's home. It was a quiet, domestic ending, unlike the violent, public deaths of Quantrill, Bloody Bill Anderson, and Jesse James. His life captures the trajectory of the men who survived the border war. They were killers shaped by absolute anarchy, yet some adapted to build the very society they once terrorized. McMurtry's record shows that the violence of the border war didn't always lead to an early grave. In his case, it provided the specific, brutal training necessary to survive the transition from a war zone to a civilized state.